A few days ago, I posted a video being critical towards the SOFI management team around their communication to the retail investor base. And that was echoed by some other content creators so far. And ultimately, the CEO of SOFI, Anthony Noto, responded saying that they are aware and that they are listening. And since I posted that video, I realized a lot of my critiques were very generalized. And overall, this took me down a rabbit hole around thinking what were some of my main concerns with SOFI. What were some of the questions that I would want management to answer if I had the opportunity to interview them? And as I began doing that mental exercise, I started breaking it all down into subcategories around the business because having covered this company for years, I have tons of questions that pertain to all of their business segments. And the reason why I'm making a video about this is because ultimately I think it would be unfair of me to just provide criticism to management without actually making constructive around the main areas of ambiguity that I'm seeing and the main questions that I would want management to respond to. And so in this video, I want to be sharing some of my main questions that I have towards management if I had the chance to interview them and why I chose these questions. Let's jump right in. Okay, so I want to dive into these questions and I want to spend maybe 1 minute or so explaining them. This video sort of ballooned over the last couple of days as I'm thinking about this. What you'll notice very quickly is that I've bundled some of these questions into themes that pertain to SoFi's business segments and other common investor asks that have come up over the past several months and years. And I think many of these questions will come as no surprise to people who have been on top of SoFi news recently. And of course, like always, as it comes to SoFi, my goal is not to be overly critical but rather to be constructive with my criticism. I'm recording this right after the SoFi Weekly, and so all of this is top of mind. And in the SoFi Weekly, I also asked the group what they would want to ask management, and they had a similar train of thought as well. So I think it's echoed across the entire SoFi community. And I genuinely think if I had the opportunity to have a conversation with SoFi management, that we'd be chatting for hours around these questions because I would keep digging until I found the root of what I'm looking for. So let's dive into that. Of course, the obvious place I wanted to start was the tech platform. The tech platform was the major disappointment with regards to the segments in 2024. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of my questions around the growth are going to be centered at the tech platform. But more importantly, around the communication with regards to the tech platform. Some of the questions that I jotted down are number one, has there been a fundamental shift in the way that management is thinking about the tech platform before and after the Technisys acquisition? Because the thought process here would be whether the Technisys acquisition has unlocked them to influence different types of deals to be able to win, and whether it accelerates their roadmap from a cross-selling perspective. And just providing more light around what Technisys and Galileo combined unlock in the short term, I think would be helpful for investors. I know in the long term, the idea is this AWS of fintech to deepen that moat for these combined businesses and to make it harder for others to compete. But I think the ambiguity lies in the short term, whether they're looking for profitability, whether they're looking to go across many verticals, and what they're really looking in terms of an unlock that Technisys has now brought to the table. Staying with the tech platform, my second question would be whether, from a macro perspective, they're seeing a demand mix for SoFi's tech platform evolve through the years, and whether they're seeing more interest now accelerating, or whether it's the same market that we found ourselves in 2023 and in 2024. This would be focused on the landscape or the fintech winter, essentially, that we've been talking about on the podcast for several months, which is to say that macroeconomic uncertainty leads to businesses being more conservative with their tech spend. And as a result, a lot of that is trickling down to Galileo having less business. And so this question would really be around getting a lay of the land with regards to the demand for Galileo and how that has been evolving over time and what they're seeing going forward with regards to specific demand guidance for Galileo in 2025. And what I would be looking for in terms of management is that we had a tech slowdown in 2023, 2024. Everybody faced it, but we're seeing a really different, more dynamic landscape in 2025. And here's why. My third question around Galileo would be to highlight that in the latest earnings call, SoFi management mentioned signing non-banking clients, including a leading hotel rewards brand. Can you share some more insights around how SoFi is thinking around expanding into new verticals beyond traditional fintech and banking? And this is really interesting to me personally as a product person to think through, because if it is part of their active strategy to go very wide with where they cast their net and to diversify away from fintech and traditional banking clients and non-banking clients, and that obviously expands the total addressable market of what Galileo is applicable for and what the sweet spot is for Galileo. if they're going into the hotel rewards brands and other companies that are non-banking specific companies, this is also something that will make the value proposition for Galileo rise because it shows that they can actually go through multiple verticals, that they're very diverse in terms of what business they can capture. And as I was thinking about this, I was also linking it to crypto and wondering whether Galileo had a potential business vertical in the expansion of crypto specifically and capturing more of that market share. Beyond that, I would really be asking management to include in their earnings presentation slides to have a breakdown of Galileo verticals so that we can better understand in a more transparent way how the vertical mix has shifted over time. In a recent earnings presentation, SoFi has included the credit performance of different vintages with regards to the personal loan cohorts. And this is essentially something that I think would be similar to a tech breakdown, but from a vertical perspective. For Galileo clients that they already have, and maybe even clients that are in the pipeline, although maybe doing this would welcome more scrutiny from the investor base than they're comfortable with. So I understand the hesitation there for management to be fully transparent in that perspective. I also saw earlier today this great analysis that Roy made around the number of mentions that the tech platform had in the previous earnings call over the past 5 years, overlaid on the revenue growth rate of the tech platform. And obviously, we knew this anecdotally, but now we can have some data to support this, that we see a correlation between the amount of times a tech platform is mentioned on an earnings call and the stagnating growth rate of the tech platform. And to this point, Roy made the argument that speaks to a lack of excitement for management, as this tech segment of the business was not growing the same way that it was in 2022. Earlier tonight in the SoFi Weekly, I said maybe that's flipped. Maybe it's a causation. It's not management's excitement that's dying down, but it's in fact introducing a third variable, which is the audience. And the audience, we know, is institutional analysts who really only care about growth. And management is now catering their responses to what the audience cares about. And if the tech platform is not growing, they're not going to talk about the tech platform. And so the root of the argument, I would argue, comes from the tech platform itself, not necessarily from management having a lack of desire or a lack of excitement to talk about the tech platform. But that remains up to debate. That still has some ambiguity around it. And I think clearing some of that up would be very helpful for investors. Looking at a cohort analysis, looking at a vertical mix over time to say, okay, well, in 2022 and in 2023, 80% of the clients that Galileo had were fintechs and traditional banks. Now in 2024, that number has dropped to 70%. In 2025, maybe it drops to 60%. And the remaining 40% is non-banking, non-fintech specific clients. Like if we had something like that, I think the retail investor base and also the institutional analysts could put together a story or a narrative around how Galileo is evolving over time. The next segment that I jumped into was the loan platform business, because this is perhaps the biggest part of the 2025 growth story for SoFi. My first question would be whether the loan platform business is today a bigger part of the growth story within the management team's perspective relative to the technology platform overall. Essentially, the idea behind this is to ask management whether the loan platform business is the latest exciting initiative that we collectively should be focused on. Because in my last video, I talked about management having this giant spotlight on one exciting initiative and then periodically over time changing where that spotlight goes. Because back a couple of years ago, they were talking about the AWS of fintech. And we on the retail side were advocating for SoFi being more than a bank because it had this technology platform. I think you're going to have a harder time advocating for that today because the technology platform is not growing. And so today, the spotlight is on the loan platform business. And this is where the heart of my question would be with regards to that segment. And then the second question around the loan platform business that I had was to further expand on that idea of moving more of their business into the loan platform business format. The idea here is based simply on the commentary that Anthony Noto made in the last earnings call, where he basically said that internally, they're thinking about moving more and more business under the loan platform business format. He argued that it's more capital light, it's more fee based, the economics make sense. You would have a lighter balance sheet that supports high return on equity. It all makes sense. Although something like that would completely re-architect the entire business. So it'd be really interesting here to understand more around how management thinks about this thought process, and whether this is something that management has thought through a contingency or whether it's something that they're actively going to try to drive the business towards. Next, I want to focus on guidance and on overall management communication to the retail shareholder base, because it was top of mind with my last video, and I want to really refine my thoughts and expectations here. First and foremost, in this category, my questions would be around guidance and shedding some more light around input parameters into guidance and how management is thinking about their forward guidance. The reason for this question is because SoFi has always triple beat their expectations, and I want to understand exactly how they come to the conclusion that they provide such low guidance numbers and how exactly they come up with the models which provides a range of different scenarios and why they choose the scenario that they do to publicly announce to the market as their formal guidance announcement. Like, I just want to understand what the inputs are that lead to such low guidance numbers. And once we understand that, we can just reverse engineer their thought process around future guidance numbers. My second question there would be with regards to an internal company culture and sharing a little bit more about competing priorities with regards to internal initiatives. I want to learn more about whether it's simply a meritocratic system where the best idea wins no matter what, and they find a way to input it into the flywheel, or whether it's the initiatives that are more revenue focused that take precedence in that discussion, or maybe it's the initiatives that fit more into that 10-year vision that dominate the discussion, or whether it's macro driven, what's going on in the market right now, and internally they're trying to align their initiatives to capitalize on what's going on in the macro. So I really want to learn more about the thought process there. I think by understanding how they think about initiatives, we can better position ourselves in the future to forecast what they might be looking to expand into. And we know that the flywheel and the mission is a very strong motivator internally, but I want to understand how they weigh that against other business targets. Next, I would ask around the company investor day. I think this is long overdue. I think we need this. And I would ask whether we could have one, of course, but more acutely, I would want to open the floor for management to share with us what would be the biggest misconceptions the retail investor base currently has around SoFi that they would want to address themselves. And more importantly, what would management want to sharpen retail investor focus around certain metrics? What would those metrics be? And you'll notice here with a lot of these questions, they're aspirational and maybe not the most realistic questions in the world. I don't think Anthony Noto would answer any of these questions, quite frankly, maybe one or two. A lot of these questions pose a lot of risk because there's many unknowns in the questions, and it's more around understanding a thought process rather than a tangible, concrete answer. And this video is more an experiment in thinking out loud than anything else, but the idea behind this is the retail shareholder base has a finite amount of information that they've gotten from official channels in the form of fireside chats, earnings calls, and press releases. And from those fragmented, finite pieces of information that management has given us, we as a retail shareholder base put together these puzzle pieces, trying to form and we stitch them together with what might be the motivation behind the management team. And I want an opportunity for the management team themselves to address these perceptions and correct them where they think correction is needed. Next, I want to focus on some other initiatives, the crypto segment, SoFi Plus, and credit cards. So, with regards to crypto, I would want more clarity around if crypto does return, how significant of a piece would it play in SoFi Invest and in the roadmap going forward? The reason behind this question is because Anthony Noto highlighted very clearly that they want to play a larger role in crypto should regulators allow this, not only from a brokerage perspective, but also from a lending perspective, maybe even custodial offerings. So I would want more details around whether something like that is something they've internally had discussions about and they have a playbook or a scenario ready to go, or if that's just him spitballing ideas and throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. And if this is something that they have a strategic plan around, how do they see an expansion into crypto integrating with the existing flywheel and the ecosystem around SoFi Plus? How are they going to stitch this all together at the end of the day? And what is the final product going to look like if this is where they want to drive the business? And while I'm on that topic, I want to learn more about SoFi Plus. I want to learn more details around what the strategic goal is with regards to SoFi Plus. This is obviously something that they launched recently. It's a subscription revenue offering, which means it's recurring and it's predictable revenue. And it highlights the value of being a member in that flywheel, in that ecosystem. So understanding how that revenue line item fits into their vision would be something that I would want to dive further into. And what is the vision for that moving forward over the next 5 or 10 years? The third initiative that I would want to learn more about would be credit cards, because SoFi over the course of 2024 has talked quite a bit about credit cards. In fact, they introduced 2 new credit cards that they were internally testing over the summer and that they finally released in the fall. My question would focus around those new credit cards specifically to learn more about internally what SoFi is facing in terms of scaling related hurdles. I would want to dive deeper into those hurdles, whether they're centered around macro conditions, unit economics, or just flat out demand in general. And finally, I grouped some other related areas of interest. AI would be one. I think AI is top of mind all throughout 2025, throughout the entire market. And I would love Anthony Noto or others in the management team to shed some more light around AI models and what they're seeing in terms of the demand with regards to AI, whether that's Cash Coach specifically or the Technisys chatbots, and where they see that AI piece playing a role in that integrated ecosystem. Because one of the things that I've been talking about in videos for the last year or so is this idea of moving from a reactive banking model to a proactive banking model. What that means is currently banking is reactive. I have to log into my account and then I see all the options and then I have to know what's the best option, whether I want to pay off my credit card or whether I want to put the money in a brokerage account or anything in between. I am the source of truth. Whereas in a proactive banking model, the AI would essentially know everything about you and how you operate, what your patterns are with your money, and the AI would then make decisions on your behalf in a proactive way to optimize your patterns. So I would really want more light around Cash Coach specifically, and not only how that plans to integrate, but how that scaling is going so far. And something else that I was thinking about as I was thinking about the AI piece was acquisitions. I mean, we talked with Chris Hager and with Tanner in the end of the year predictions episode whether SoFi would make a 2025 acquisition. I think given the challenges that some fintechs are facing, I would want to know whether Anthony Noto is seeing a more attractive acquisition opportunities emerging now in 2025 that didn't exist in 2024 and how they're thinking about it. The last formal communication we got from management around acquisitions was back when they acquired Wyndham, where basically analysts asked them, "Hey, are you going to do more acquisitions?" And basically, Anthony Noto responded saying, "We're always going to be opportunistic around acquisitions. If something comes up that's too good to pass up, we're not going to pass it up." And then he said, "But we're also trying to digest the Technisys acquisition." And then, like, they acquired Wyndham, which obviously, in that context, I took to mean that Wyndham was an opportunistic acquisition. So I'd want to know his thought process around that in general. And because this video is going long, I'll cut it a little bit short. I would want to know a little bit more about the branding deals. So TGL is top of mind. I mean, this question also came up in the SoFi Weekly earlier tonight. What are the key factors that SoFi considers when evaluating the success of a branding deal? Is it more focused on capturing new customer segments? How do they quantify that ROI, right? Like they invested that money. How are they quantifying the return on that investment? Is it unaided brand awareness? And if so, how do they quantify that? Or is it very numbers driven? How many customers came from that segment versus the lifetime value of those customers, CAC to LTV essentially. So I want to know about that specifically because that gives us an insight into future branding deals that they might have and how they're thinking about approaching that. And I have a million questions here on my list, but the last one I want to highlight in this video is international expansion. If SoFi were to expand internationally, which markets would be the most logical first steps that they would take? Would it be Hong Kong because they already have a presence there? Would it be Dubai? And what would be the approach? Would that be through an M&A, through an acquisition? Would it be through a partnership, or would it be through just direct entry? They just set up shop and they start offering their products. I mean, this is something that's not top of mind for SoFi because I think they have a lot of market to still go through in the US. They're still very, very small relative to where they could be in the US, but it's something that I think would speak to management's long-term vision and their overall interest around how they're thinking about this business for the next decade. Anyways, I hope this video gave you some insights in terms of what are some of the main questions that I have to ask management team. And I hope management does watch this video. I hope management does eventually address some of these issues because I think that they would help the retail shareholder base get a better grasp of how they're thinking about the business in all timeframes, in the short term for 2025, around their focus on growth and not profitability, around the midterm, around how are we going to integrate this flywheel, how does SoFi Plus and crypto and all of these other aspects of the loan platform business, how do they all integrate? And around the long term, an international expansion, acquisitions, the tech platform specifically, and that AWS of fintech. Are we still driving towards that? And this is just a hiccup in the road, or have we changed paths altogether? So now I'm rambling, but essentially that's where my head is at, is trying to understand a more holistic view around this business, how they operate, and how, more importantly, they think about approaching problems, because that will then give us a repeatable framework, which then we can take in our future predictions for this business. I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the questions that you would ask the management team at SoFi, and what would you want to know most about? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.